So thank you, for being here in person International Data Week, as well as for those that are online. This is a hybrid session, so we're going to try our best to speak into the microphones for those of us that are speaking, and we do have a couple of open discussion and question and answer and all of that kind of jazz in this breakout session. So I will just ask that you raise your hand, and myself or Andrew or Mikiko or Lars or anyone else who wants to grab a microphone and run to the other end of the room will get you a microphone to speak into. Otherwise, our colleagues online won't be able to hear you. And just so you don't think you're in the wrong session, this is the 6-month progress update for the Global Open Research Commons Interest Group and Working Group, or the GORC International Implementations Working Group, which is technically our second working group under the GORC umbrella. My name is CJ Woodford. I am one of the co-chairs of the group. I work for the Digital Research Alliance of Canada as a research officer. And I'm accompanied today with other speakers who are in the front row. No one else wanted to sit in the front row besides the co-chairs, which is great. But I'll allow them to introduce themselves as we kind of cycle through the slides, and everyone's going to have a turn to meet everyone and speak. All right, and so as we have been hearing already, and it's very important to recognize the acknowledgement of country, I'm not as familiar with the acknowledgement for this land in Brisbane, again, being from Canada, but just celebrating the first Australians whose lands we meet, pay respect to their elders past and present. And in Canada, we like to say past, present, and future, recognizing that reconciliation extends beyond the present. All right, welcome to new RDA members. And maybe before, we do actually have a little bit of a Mentimeter, demographics, getting people to answer questions on their mobile phones kind of situation. But what I might do before that is say, is there anyone new to RDA in the room? If you can just do a show of hands, and I'll call out like the number online for those that are listening online. So, yeah? Oh my goodness. That's got to be like 6 or 7, maybe 8. The hands went up and then they went down really fast. So welcome for those of you that are new to the Research Data Alliance, and thank you for choosing our breakout session to come to in the first breakout session slots. That's excellent. So a quick agenda overview. We're going to do some welcoming remarks. We're then going to move into a little bit of an overview on the Global Open Research Commons, or GORC, typology, essential elements, and international model. You'll often see that abbreviated to IM. So in the GORC initiative, we do a lot of abbreviations. I apologize in advance for that. I'm going to try and spell them out as much as I can for you. We're going to do a connections to other work. There's been a lot of collaboration that we've done with other working groups, interest groups, and folks outside of the RDA in the last 6 months since the GORC 2 working group kind of got started. We'll talk about, and this is Andrew's joke, so I kind of wish that he had said this, but the demo of the fancy new Stripey, and that's because we were fortunate enough to have an RDA Cascade grant, or an RDA Tiger Cascade grant, which is for developing a visualization tool because the model was very dense. So Lars will talk about that. And then we'll kind of walk through some of the other things we've been up to, like profiles, mappings, and all of that fun stuff. And then we're hoping to throw out questions in all those things too, but really kind of then open it up to a full discussion on what are we doing that's helpful with community, so what can we continue, but then what are some things that we haven't done yet or haven't seen or haven't developed that would be helpful to the community moving forward. Okay, welcome and demographics. So for those of you that are new to the Research Data Alliance or new to GORC in general, the Global Open Research Commons International Implementations Working Group is coordinated through the GORC Interest Group. In RDA, we have interest groups, working groups, and communities of practice. So we're kind of an example of an interest group that spun up a working group to say we have specific things that we want to work on. That was the GORC International Model Working Group. That group actually ended about a year ago, so yeah, something like that, a year ago. And we had so much work left to do that we said, well, we're not going to just end it here. Let's create GORC 2. So these are all under the GORC Interest Group umbrella, which came together as a neutral space for folks to kind of talk about digital research infrastructure and commons and how a lot of the challenges are similar across jurisdictions and disciplines, and so on and so forth. What this GORC 2 working group was intended to do was maintain the recommendation that we had put forward, but that was the international model itself. So the GORC International Model is an RDA recommendation. It has multiple official adoption stories, and we're continuing to do work on that to increase adoption and increase accessibility, visibility, and other things that are useful to the community for that. So what we want to start off with here is a Mentimeter to say, who's here, what do you know about GORC, and what would you like to learn about it? So I'm going to flip my screen. Yeah, that worked. Nice. And we're going to present. All right, so if you didn't see it on the other slide, here's your opportunity now. If you don't have a mobile device or a device that can do QR codes, don't worry, you can do it the old-fashioned way. If you go to www.menti.com and enter this code, 67262670, so it's got some numerical play there, then you can get started with the Menti. So I'll wait until the mobile phones are down before, and don't take them down if you don't have the information yet. Please take the information. But I'll wait until folks seem to have it up before I move on to the next slide. All right, we got it? Ready? All right. Have you heard of the GORC Interest Group, Working Group, or International Model before? And when we say before, we mean before noon local time, not like the last 10 minutes of me talking about it. Okay, we definitely have some people who haven't heard of it before and came to this session anyway. Welcome, thank you. Nice, that's evened out around there. So a lot of people in the room have heard of it before, welcome back, and some people haven't, so that's good to know for us as presenters to say, where do we start in terms of explanations? I keep losing my mouse as well, which is not helpful. All right, and so to give us an idea of who's here today, what country are you from? Not surprising. Oh. I like how Australia went completely off the screen. Excellent representation. Yeah, suspicious about Antarctica, actually.
That would be me.
Okay, very good. So unsurprisingly, Australia is the largest word here, but surprising actually for me is how large Germany, Canada, the United Kingdom, Sweden, Ireland, like obviously multiple people from these locations. So pretty cool. There's a big geographic diversity here, especially from the literal other side of the world. Are you also suspicious about Tasmania? Brutal. All right, we'll keep going. All right, the next thing we'd like to know is what sort of organization you're from. The reason why we ask this question for GORC things is because the GORC International Model has a number of different use cases. We kind of built it with the intention that it would be used by digital research infrastructure organizations. So you might be from a commons or a research platform or a national data service. So we're kind of aiming for folks in that realm. But what we've seen is that the use cases go far beyond those users and those adopters. So it's good to know who else is in the audience so that we can make sure that we are kind of keeping in mind those other use cases and we can speak to those, especially if you have questions for us during the Q&A period. I'm glad I added government in last second for those 3 people. And 6 other. Just curious, for those that said other, if you're comfortable saying what kind of organization you're from, we'll get you a microphone. Andrew was so ready. All right. See any skills in that.
Research infrastructure.
Research infrastructure, okay. Oh, yeah.
So I've got both the World Data System and also SCAR, the Scientific Committee for Antarctic Research.
Oh yeah, I'm not even sure how I would classify SCAR. All right, good data, good data. We got to think about how we reclassify this next time. Thank you.
Code data.
Code data, okay, yeah. Yeah, that really doesn't fit here. Yeah, yeah. All right, don't see any other hands, so thank you for those that were willing to share. That's excellent. All right, another word cloud. What do you think of when you hear the word commons? GORC is not an acceptable answer, by the way. We've already spent 15 minutes talking about it. I'm sorry, what? Wombles?
It's a children's show. The Wombles of Wimbledon Common. Are we? Thank you. I'm not going to say it.
All right, some good things here. Open, data, standards, shared. Avoiding tragedy. All right. Collaboration. A couple of things here that are very similar. Shared, sharing, standards, standardized. Fairness, interoperability. Agreed governance. Okay, all right, we're getting to the heart of it. Collective benefit. Wow, okay, there's a lot of stuff on here, so thank you for that. And for some of these more detailed questions, I just want to highlight that the outputs of the Menti will also put in the collaborative notes after the session, so you'll be able to see everyone's responses and these summaries afterwards too. All right, awesome. Thanks, folks. And then one last one. Which areas are you interested in learning more about? So this is getting a little bit more into what have we actually been working on under the GORC 2 working group. So some of the areas of work that we have identified, and I'm interested in seeing what you're interested in hearing more about, because that might shift how we do the agenda a little bit for the rest of the session. Adoption, support, and feedback, mapping with relevant frameworks, visualizations and graphics or alternative formats for the model, thematic slices, and user documentation. Oh, and implementation profiles. That one went to the top really fast, so I missed it. So it looks to me like implementation profiles is by far the most common interest for folks, which is not terribly surprising given some of the connections of work you'll hear about later. Okay, this kind of aligns with what we were doing with the group already. So thank you so much for participating and letting us get to know you a little bit better, but then also what your interest is kind of in this space of GORC as well. So we'll flip back over to I'm going to leave this question up in case people still want to enter your thinking, but we're going to flip back over to the presentation. All right. All right, so for this one, I think, Mikiko, you're going to be speaking, or would you like me to continue? For me to continue? Okay. So the GORC 2 deliverables are intended to identify and define the implementations of the GORC International model. The model has been created. It's a very large spreadsheet with a ton of considerations in it, lots of examples, but the next part of that was, okay, now we know what a commons might need to consider as you're building or developing or expanding or what have you. But how do you actually do it? How do you actually do the things that are in the model? Because it's a bunch of, considerations. So that was that's one of the main things, is looking at examples of what an implementation of the GORC International model might look like. We wanted to improve usability of that model because, as I've already said, it was a lot of considerations and it was a lot of stuff for any one person or organization to go through as they were looking for adoption. So that included things like looking at making better documentation, carving out thematic subsets. Maybe you don't need to look at the whole model if you are someone who's working in the research data management portion of your organization. Maybe there's specific considerations for you that can be pulled out. Also looking with mapping with existing frameworks. If you're already adapting the NIST RDAF, how can that, maybe you're already partway to adopting GORC. Or if you've already adopted GORC, maybe you're partway to getting towards a Core Trust Seal certification. Maybe there's ways that these frameworks don't have to be individual, but they can be done complementary together. So looking for those mappings with other frameworks, models, vocabularies, and principles was a big one too. Lastly, ensuring updated relevance was, critical. This is a vastly changing environment, right? When we're talking about e-research, when we're talking about digital research infrastructure, when we're talking about data, and now that we have to, and now with the increasing emphasis on artificial intelligence and being ready for artificial intelligence methods and infrastructure. So ensuring that we have the model continuously up to date was another major point that we needed to continue with. I might walk this back a little bit, realizing that we didn't say this at the beginning. The GORC 2 working group is still active. It's only 6 months. That was the whole reason why we named the session the 6-month update. Working groups, for those that are new to RDA, run about 18 months. You can request extensions, but you shouldn't. So we're only about a third of the way through. So this is kind of what we'd like to accomplish by the end of the working group, and we're in the process of working towards all 3 of these main pillars of D1, D2, D3. All right. The GORC interest group did a lot of work in order to create the model. So the GORC 2 working group is based on the international model that's already an RDA recommendation, which we've discussed previously. The GORC typology was the foundation of the GORC model. It was the very first supporting output from the GORC initiative. And what the GORC typology did is defined the essential elements. And if you've seen this hexagonal structure before, that's what it is. It is actually a longer document. It has lots of definitions and explanations in it, but the main part of this that we kind of continue to come back to is the graphic, because it's nice and well done. Thank you, ARDC. So there are essential elements that then the model built out. So you can kind of think of it as the typology covers human elements, which are these white hexagons along the top, and more technical elements along the bottom in that light blue, and then you have a central element in the center of standards, which is that navy. So human elements kind of covering governance structures, engagement, sustainability, rules of participation and access, and human capacity. And then the technical elements along the bottom covering compute, storage, network, and authentication authorization infrastructure, ICT infrastructure is maybe how it's sometimes called, services and tools, and research objects. So the model went into each one of these hexagons and built it out. So instead of just a hexagon, you have lots of entities and characteristics that fall under each one. We have categories and subcategories in the model, as well as characteristics and attributes and features, which are the characteristics. Big spreadsheet. There is a more narrative version that you can look through now as well, and then the WebGraph version is in development and will be showcased in a minute. All right, outcomes from P24. So typically when we go through working group updates, we kind of look at it as what did we say we would do in the last plenary session, and then looking forward to what are we going to do next. So in the last plenary session, we said, okay, we want to refine the commons dimensions and validate them with the GORC International Model Speaker Series that inspired them. So we wanted to say, kind of thinking around adoption support and user documentation, are there different types of commons? And for those in the room that was a part of the discussions in the GORC 2 working group, I will get to why we maybe didn't do that in a second. We wanted to further explain the value of commons profiles. So these implementations of the model for different groupings of commons or organizations, as well as specific organizations, what their value was and what the benefit is to sharing that information. And then creating task groups and task forces to work on the following topics, and there's a few of them. So one of the main ones was the combination of folks coming from GORC and the National Data Services interest group to create a task force that's a liaison between our two groups. We've already kind of given an example of you could be a national data service and still use the GORC model, and I think that's been seen by a lot of folks in the National Data Services Interest Group as being of key interest. We also have been working really closely with our friends in Maldreth, which is for mapping the landscape of digital research tools. And the H stands for harmonization, and I'm never really sure if I'm supposed to say for harmonization or of harmonization, but harmonization is the point there. So we also to create a task force with these to say, where do our models fit together, complement each other, connect together? Does one become part of the other? When do you move from GORC to Maldreth and back again? That sort of thing. We wanted to create implementation-specific profiles, so we have a task group dedicated to that, model containers, documentation, slices, and mappings. So that was a huge chunk of work that we identified in the last plenary session that we wanted to get started. All right, so for the first bullet point here, we realized in several discussions on commons types that it's not really realistic to say there are types of commons. Commons come from their own context. That's going to be social, cultural, economic context, political context, geographic context, and in some cases, discipline-specific contexts. So we know that there's going to be just a huge myriad of facets that commons and organizations that might identify as commons are going to come from. Calling them types just was too prescriptive. So we dropped that. But having these different facets of commons that you can then pull out and say, who's maybe like my organization or who might we want to be like in the future is something that we can do. So that's going to be our new way of using what we're going to use as types, is we're going to call them facets and say they're dimensions across which a commons can fall. We've revamped some of our communiques about GORC, and we're going to do more GORC events as part of this, explaining commons profiles and trying to get the word out there on how to use the model and how we're seeing it's making an impact and benefit to the community. Lastly, task forces are well underway. Some of them have become decentralized, meaning we realized that the work that they were assigned didn't make sense for a task group. It made more sense for us to work on it as an entire working group and have the whole group go about it a little bit more slowly, but a little bit more cohesively as well. I will say the two task forces with the National Data Service and Maldreth have very much stayed alive and well. I might even be so bold to say, probably have the most work done out of any of the task groups. So those cross-liaison task forces have really kickstarted it. All right, and so here's where we start talking about connections of the GORC with other groups, and I'm going to invite Andrew to speak to this.
So this diagram is less pretty than the hexagons because it was done by me and not by a professional graphic artist. And it's what we lovingly call the GORC interaction onion. I'm not sure whether we should trademark that or not. And it's us trying to map out some of the ways in which the interest group, which is the thing in the middle, I need to do this for the online people, there we are. The two working groups that are specifically connected, the Health Data Commons Working Group that you'll hear a bit more about later today, and of course the International Implementations Working Group that CJ's just been talking about. But then as we move out beyond the groups that GORC is coordinating with, there's a whole series of groups that we would call cooperating with. And so here we have Maldreth that you've already heard referred to, the National Data Services Interest Group, again, that you've heard referred to, that Natalie and I and Bernhard Miller from GESIS in Germany are co-chairing. And then some things that are kind of on the boundaries. So the Trusted Research Service Providers Working Group, which is what that thing is, fair data mappings, update of higher research, digital research infrastructure. So these are things that are kind of on the border between cooperation and networking. And then there's a whole series of groups around the outside that we have a kind of more loose connection with. They're interested in our work. They're thinking about how they might pick up our work. We try and go to their groups when we have meetings at plenaries. And over time, some of those groups may move from the outer ring closer in as we identify particular ways in which we want to collaborate and work together. So really, and I should say, by the way, this is just an RDA-centric, Hillary's not complaining about that, an RDA-centric view of the groups we interact with. We imagine that over time there are going to be a wider set of groups that we have relationships with that are not just RDA groups. So, as CJ said, we've been doing a lot in the last 6 months. One of the things that we've been doing is a Lorentz workshop. So this was an invitational workshop that we held at the Lorentz Centre in Leiden. You put in proposals to be able to use the centre, and they provide a very nice collaborative space for up to a week. So we did that. We had 25 attendees. We bravely titled the workshop Making the Global Open Research Commons Truly Global. And we had a much larger list of people that we invited. And I was going to say unfortunately. Unfortunately for the title of the workshop, many of the non-European participants were unable to come for a variety of reasons. It was also complicated by the fact that we ended up having the workshop badly placed for Europe in terms of summer holidays, just because that's when we were able to get the room. So Europe was overrepresented at the workshop, but that was still fine. We had 5 days of very, very solid effort, kind of exhausted at the end of each day, and we've produced a report. And so the QR code, thank you, CJ, as well as that DOI points you to the report that's the output of that workshop. And the report goes into a lot of detail, but the high-level summaries were that the focus of the initiative needs to move from developing the model to adoption and use of the model. So up to now, we've been tweaking the model essentially based on our own thoughts. And the workshop said, no, you need to actually look at what people are doing with it and focus on that. And the second point flows out of that changes to the model should be based on feedback from adopters. So rather than me or CJ saying, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea if, CJ's perhaps less guilty of that than me. Me saying, wouldn't it be a great idea if, that we should focus on specific questions that were coming out of people trying to adopt it. This doesn't work for us. You're missing that. Why don't you have this included? Those kinds of things. And that we would try and move to a slightly slower pace of change and a more controlled and staged changes to the model. And the last one, and again this came very strongly out of the workshop, was that long-term sustainability and governance needs closer attention, that there are more and more groups that are interested in the international model, they're interested in using it, thinking how it might apply to them. And as we get this broadening out of adoption and use, those people that are putting effort into adopting the model should have greater say in the governance of the model. So, task force and task group updates. You happy with me to continue on those? Yep. So we had, as CJ, we had a very ambitious set of task groups that we had listed at the last meeting. We've done a little bit of rationalisation. We've dissolved the profile and user documentation task groups, and instead we're going to try and decentralise that work a bit more, rather than bringing people together and having regular meetings. We're going to allow people to, if you like, bite off particular chunks of work that they're interested in working on. The mappings and model container task groups have come together, and you'll see a little bit of that work later on in this session today. The GORC NDS task force, so this is the joint activity between the GORC International Model Working Group and the National Data Services Interest Group. Originally the idea was that we would try and define a national profile, and what we've realised is that different national data services are different. And so what we're going to try and do is create a number of different national data services profiles and then try and abstract from those what the commonality is, rather than defining a more abstract thing to begin with. Again, this is consistent with our insight coming out of the Lorentz workshop, that let's look at what people are actually doing and then generalise from that, rather than going general first. And the Muldreth Task Force, which has a separate session at this International Data Week, has been looking at some of those concrete connections between the two models, and they've got suggestions about how that integration might be presented in a future version, iteration of the international model. So that's a quick overview of some of the work that's been going on. And now, Lars or Lauren, which of you is speaking on Health Data Commons? Okay. So Lars, if you could give us an update on what's happening with this one.
Maybe just one, like, because we are actually ahead of schedule for like a little bit. I want to take a pause and say, does anyone have any questions, either from folks online, which we as the co-chairs can't actually see the online chat, so sorry. You can? Okay, nice. Andrew can see the chat. But if anyone has any questions so far, so we've just done a huge round of, this is all the stuff we're doing, this is the updates, you know, this is a second working group under an interest group. So before we dive into another working group that's under this umbrella, which adds another layer of complexity, I just want to pause and say, does anyone have any questions about the initiative or what we've done? Yeah. Oh, we got to get you a microphone.
Sorry,
Keep
what
your
was
hand
that?
raised for a second so we can find you.
Who was? I'll Steve.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it works for me. I was surprised you gave me the microphone. So I'm really impressed by all the work that's gone into it, and even more impressed with the self-awareness that maybe it's time to implement some things and start getting feedback. But no, I mean, I think that there are a lot of groups that will plow ahead and continue to write white papers and publish and continue to refine their idea without implementing it. Speaking of implementation, what's a scenario, what's a successful implementation of GORC look like to you at this juncture? See, told you.
That is a really good question, yeah. And I think we've got some other stuff to showcase that I think is in that direction. Andrew, you're the one presenting on profiles. Do you think we should save it till then or talk about it now?
I think we should save some of it for then.
Okay.
But I would add that I think success in a year's time is going to look very different from success in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. And one of the things that came out of the Lorentz workshop for me was that if we do everything that is written in the report, and we won't because the world will change along the way, but if we do everything that is recommended in that report, that's a 10-year work program. And so one of the challenges for us is going to be prioritising what we do commensurate with the level of effort that is available to apply to it, and informed by the use cases that we're seeing from adopters. All of which is a long-winded way of saying crystal ball's murky and I can't give you a great answer yet.
I might give a slightly more abstract. Oh, Kieran, is that a question or a comment? Oh, I might just add an abstract kind of interpretation of that is like all of the stuff that Andrew said, and for me, a success of GORC, or not even necessarily adoption of it, would be that using the GORC model is a direct stepping stone. Maybe it's not the first stepping stone in an organization's path, or maybe it is, but it would be a stepping stone that would help them accomplish what their goals are. So maybe that's helping them identify what those goals are and getting them halfway to a certification they want, or adopting a framework that their government requires them to use, or something like that. Or maybe it is an end goal in and of itself of, we want to implement, I'm not even going to say everything in the model because I think that would be impossible, but that's what I think a success would be, is just, it's a stepping stone to actually get the organization to whatever goal they've set for themselves, or that government or funder might set for them.
Thanks. I think that's a really fantastic question, because making all of us want to talk about it. But I wanted to just give a observation, I guess, from a slightly different perspective. And that's, this started off, it was that everyone was building commons around the world, and there was a need, like, you know, everyone's doing it on their own. And there was a period where it was diverging. And I think this is an attempt to sort of start to characterize what those are, and in what might success look like is less divergence and a period of convergence, which allows us to interoperate and all those benefits to come through. That sort of a macro level answer for that as well is how I see it.
Hi, Natalie Hauer. I'm from the Canadian Research Data Centre Network. And who was it that asked that question about earlier? Oh, it was you. Hi, Steve. So one of the things that I was bringing up at the workshop was I don't know what adoption really means. So we use the term adoption, but if I look at my own organization, which I think of as a kind of open research commons, depends on how you define open, but I think of it as fitting within there. I got my team to look at part of the profile, and we went through one of the elements and started talking about what we do and how it aligns with, or not how it aligns, I have to be really careful with language, how we can use the descriptors in the model to understand what we do, what we don't do. And one of the big debates at the Lorentz Center workshop was around, should this model be used for benchmarking? Should it be seen as something that is prescriptive? And there was a lot of resistance to both of those things, to using it as benchmarking. But if we're looking for convergence, then there has to be something prescriptive about it, right? So to me, understanding what you're doing, looking at the different elements and all of the sort of, I'm forgetting the terms, all the little bits that fill in the elements, what is it, attributes? Yeah, there's a lot of words. And looking at those elements is very interesting to be able to describe what you're doing and to see how this fits within the model. But adoption itself, to me, is still a very complicated concept, because we're not looking at this like the Core Trust Seal, for example, being a certification that you either pass it or you don't. So it's a good conversation.
Yeah, so different people adopt the model in different ways for different purposes, and you'll see some examples, including the one Natalie's just described, in a little bit.
All right, excellent. So we are officially not on time anymore, but it was a super good question. And so we'll try and make space for questions as we go through. So definitely keep thinking of them, because this is what these breakout sessions are for, is for presenting the work that's been done, work that's going to happen, but then also hearing your thoughts too. So Lars.
All right. Try to be quick.
No. It's okay.
Let's see if I can, there we go. So, first, I'm going to talk about two things. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a working group that is associated with this working, the working group and the interest group of GORC. And that is the Health Data Commons GORC Working Group. And we also love acronyms, so that's what you will see a lot of times in our texts. You will see the acronym HDC for Health Data Commons. And what this is basically we're trying to figure out what the profile of a health data commons is. What is a health data commons? And what is the minimum sort of interoperable space we work in? We have basically currently two parts that are active. We have a survey that we encourage anyone who's working with health data commons, or identify as a sort of a health data commons, to go in and take that survey. There is a nice little QR code there. And if you don't do it, use the common notes and send it to your friends who are. And we also have a list where we're trying to list everyone who's working on this type of things. And the reason for that is we want to build a speaker series, kind of the same way that the original GORC IM working group did, to have a speaker series to figure out what it is. And another really important thing to talk about when it comes to this is we have excellent people working. We have Bob and Nina sitting here. Lauren unfortunately couldn't be. So Bob, raise your hand. And Nina, please raise your hand. And Nina is especially important right now because she can help you join our health data happy hour. On Tuesday, 6 p.m.
There's a small typo.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like Wednesday, but it's actually Tuesday. And if you talk to Nina, she can help you get into the WhatsApp group. So if you're interested in health data and talking about health data commons and these things, we're going to have a little happy hour on Tuesday. So, and that we will organize it through this WhatsApp group and basically meet here in the sort of entrance of the convention center and then move off to a nice place to sit and talk. So that is in short what we have done so far. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd like just to.
My name is Bob Grossman. I'm involved in about a dozen data commons around the U.S. I'm at the University of Chicago. I'm with one of the co-chairs of this group. I just want to highlight that first bullet. We had a lot of discussion and there was a lot of progress made at the Lorenz workshop about sort of convergence and adoption and other topics that we heard about. This particular working group is very, very interested if I have 2 or more health data commons in different locations, either in the same country or different countries, what are the minimal number of services so in a well-defined sense they can interoperate? So it's a little different than these broader questions, but if you want some level of interoperability, and it's the part of this working group to sort of understand what that means, what are the minimum services so you can do that? So in addition to the survey and the list, that is one of our focuses. That's complementary but supporting of the broader GORC framework.
Yeah, very well said. We also are working on a structured survey of different, what's published about commons at the moment. So we're doing a survey and a structured, what's it called? My brain just blanked. But basically we're doing a structured review of what's been written about research commons from different levels. So that's what we're currently working on. And in order to continue, I will now switch hats from being the co-chair of the HTC GORC working group to being the representative for the, see if I can, nope. It doesn't want to let me. Yeah, but I also want to be able to move out. There we go. Yeah. So now I'm going to talk about this stripy thing. So we were fortunate enough to get Tiger funding to start a project, and this is currently being implemented by the National Bioinformatics Sweden, which has a development team that is now doing a visualization for a tool. And to show that tool, we're going to quickly go here. This is going to be a quick demonstration. Let's see if I can actually get to it. I have to exit the Menti. I just escaped, right? Yeah. And then I need to find myself. Yeah. that's where I am. So currently, when you enter that lovely website, you will end up in this very empty space. But it is actually not empty, because as we click in here, you can see a network graph that details the nodes, and there is also legend explaining what the kind of symbols are. So instead of that complicated, very large Excel sheet that is fantastic but somewhat difficult to navigate, you can basically choose what you want to see. You will be able to choose profiles that are just part of it or that overwrite somehow. You will be able to choose thematic slices, like if you're only working with governance and leadership. We are just finished translating the entire model. Unfortunately, it's not part of this demonstration yet, because we need to validate it before we can actually publish it. But the entire model is huge. And we will show a little bit more on it on Friday on the satellite meeting. And also, if you're interested about the GORC International model, the good thing is you click about and you can read about it, and you actually have the references to the papers. So everything is at your fingertip. And the next feature that is really cool is that, let's go home, is that you can export your model to Data Stewardship Wizard, and then you can answer the questions inside the Data Stewardship Wizard and generate your own report or model that is tailored for your organization, for your adaptation. So you can write your own how you want to interpret it, and that is the power of this tool. There will also be a repository where you can submit slices in a JSON format, and then those can then be incorporated by the IM group, and they can say, okay, this will be actually pulled in, so because it will work through a GitHub repository. So that's the progress at the moment of the visualization tool in 5 minutes. And I hope I see you guys on Friday for more fun GORC stuff, if you're here then. Mike to Hillary. So I can also mention that we will release, the model will be released in about a month's time, exactly. Yeah. So in 1 month's time, we will actually release it. And this actually runs as a Docker.
Okay.
So currently it's running on GitHub Pages, but you can also run it as a Docker container on your own computer, in your own space. For example, if you have, or let's say you are working with very sensitive things, like indigenous people data, or with other sensitive data, you might not want to be out there and moving in a public space. Well, then you can just download the model, the visualization tool, run it on your own laptop or your own secure cluster or wherever you want, and you can run a local DSV, and then those can interact within your own sphere, so you can have full control yourself.
Brilliant. So, again, I'd just like to ask, so we know the date. This is something we really need to tell the community, and part of the job of the Research Data Alliance, of course, in not just facilitating the groups and giving you the thing, but it's also promoting and communicating this. So we are available to do that, but we need you to tell us when the timings come in. So it's a note or an action for you, please, because this is really, you know, we know that GORC is becoming more and more popular, and we're really, really pleased and grateful. And it's a bit like this morning when I said 7 years ago, the care principles, right, we talked about, and now they're all over the place. So GORC, so please tell us so that we can really, you know, highlight and promote this and get it out. Thanks.
So,
Thanks, Hilary.
in
Andrew,
1 month's time.
Andrew Treloar, we will absolutely be promoting it. I mean, this was funded through RDA Tiger funding. We'll be absolutely promoting that through the RDA Tiger channels as well as through RDA as well. Sorry, quick comment from Natalie.
No, really quick question. So can you go in and annotate this? Sorry if I missed that. Like, I'm looking at it on my computer, but can you click on something and then write what is relevant to your organization?
What you do, so let me see if I can get back to that.
You don't have to necessarily show me. I'm just wondering if that's, because that would be
The
useful.
data that you have here,
Yeah.
I mean, you can change that data through submission to the you can either have your own model and add your own model completely. The JSON format is open, so you can add your own complete model if you want. You can also, of course, submit things to the repository and say, here I created a fork. This is what I think should be in it. But more importantly, once you export it to the DSV, there is where you write the answers to your questions. So here you kind of get the explanation. See if I can manage to. So you get the explanation so you can read about it and kind of see how it connects to other parts of the attributes and the different essential models and how they will kind of interconnect. And with this smaller model that we just have here, that's just for testing purposes, that one, you don't see like, oh, that doesn't seem so much, it's not that bad. But if you look at the big model that actually we're currently validating, that is huge. It fills the entire screen and more. So that's when this visualization tool really shines, because now that's when you can look at the different slices, that thematic slices that you want, that we're going to hear about in a minute now. So yeah.
And we do plan to have an open discussion period at the end so that we can come back to questions and all of that good stuff. But yeah, so thank you, Lars, for showcasing that. And so you might have noticed in that tool that there were a number of things along the side. You could look at profiles, you could look at slices. We're going to be talking about what some of those things are now and some of our progress on that front. First, though, we're going to talk a little bit about mappings. So some of the groups have been working on mapping to other frameworks and models. This is something that will likely be interconnected with the tool, but it's not going to be areas of the tool, it's going to be independent. So I'm not going to go through each individual one, but I am going to show you the mapping template very quickly. Some of the mappings that are actually available, is this shaking? What is going on? Okay, well, hopefully that'll damp itself out. Oh, wow, sorry, guys. So the reason why we've done some of these mappings and in the template, what we've done is kind of say why we've done something and why it's valuable. So we've looked at Invest in Open Infrastructure, InfraFinder, to say that's another e-research tool that is often used. Where does GORC fit in with that? How is our terminology the same and how is it different? We've looked at, similarly, Glossary for Data Commons, Meshes, and Platforms. Rob, that is your work. So that one is also to say, what is the terminology being used in the field and how is GORC either reflecting that? Are we using the same terms for the same concepts or are we not? How can we integrate them together? The last two here are a little bit more intense around mapping to Core Trust Seal and International Data Spaces Protocol. This is really to say, these are two protocols or certifications that are widely used in the field of e-research and digital research infrastructure, and how does GORC either help support them, complement them, aim for the same things, that kind of question. So all of these are hyperlinks. I'm not going to go through each one, but I will show you the mapping template very quickly. All right, make this larger. So in the mapping template, and this is what we've used kind of following on from the fair mapping working group who we also work with, we're really trying to keep all those things. So we kind of say, you know, summary, why are you doing it, what's the value, and then it gets into the hard stuff, which is the actual mapping. So this is a set of methodology that we've developed based on Fair Mapping's working group because it's really important for RDA working groups to follow each other's recommendations, which sounds like something that should be super obvious, but it's really easy to just go off and do your own thing, so we're trying to be careful. And a little bit of explanation on structure, your approach, and then what are you actually doing? So we're following that structure based on the SCOS mapping properties, kind of assuming that something is narrower than, broader than, equivalent to, or related to otherwise. Oh yeah, and so very helpful in the drop-downs, you can also select one of those SCOS relations. So we're just trying to make sure that we're following best practice in creating our own intermediate outputs. So most of the mappings that we have linked in that slide follow this narrative template, and some of them do kind of have a table in the document, but a lot of them actually go back out into a spreadsheet, just because it's a little bit easier to navigate drop-downs and keep it uniform in this. All right, so that's mappings. And we can take questions on that at the end if we have time, but just highlighting that particular working group has been doing a lot of work around getting these mappings together, ready for comment with each other, and then also with the wider group, and then also putting together some of the intermediate things like thinking about persistent identifiers for the individual components in the GORC model. There's a lot that kind of went into this, and I do really thank Task Group 2 and 5 for kind of pulling all these things together. Adoption tools. So this is getting into profiles, which is the actual interesting part, in my opinion. We've been thinking a lot about user documentation, so we do have a communique that has been developed, and we're in the process of having it translated to Spanish and Portuguese. It's currently available in English, and you'd think, me being in Canada, I'd be able to translate it to French, but I am unfortunately not bilingual. So there's that unfortunate piece, but one thing we also learned from the Lorentz workshop is not just user documentation, but also having a narrative profile template. And you'll actually see this narrative profile template in action. This encourages the user to identify their purpose and their approach. So not just diving into a spreadsheet and starting to fill things out, but really kind of centering it around what are you doing and what do you want to do? Connecting the model to your context, considering your current states and your objectives, and then if you want to, or if you have the gumption to do so, you can dive into the more detailed spreadsheet version. And so I'm going to pass it back to Andrew to actually walk us through 2 concrete examples of what profiles can look like using both of the adoption tools that we've developed.
Thanks, CJ. So in the interest of time, we'll just do this very quickly just to give you a sense of what the last two tabs. That one? Yeah. There. I see what you mean about the mouse. There we go. So the first one is using the spreadsheet tool. So CJ has already referred to the spreadsheet tool. This is the full model in tabular form. And so each of the essential elements has a tab. So governance and leadership, for instance, there. And the columns reflect the category, the subcategory, the attribute, the feature, an extended description in some cases, and some examples. And the consideration level is, core is what we say you really should think about how this applies to your commons. We're not saying it's mandatory, but we're saying it's really important. Remember about the others, core, optional, desirable, thank you. Core, desirable, optional. So desirable is you might want to think about it, and optional is it's entirely up to you. And this particular tab in the spreadsheet goes on for quite a while. This is why the visualization tool that Lars just demonstrated is probably going to be a preferable way of getting access to it. But when we started developing the model, when CJ started developing the model, spreadsheets were the sort of the least bad way of doing it at the time. We've got better ways of doing it now. Understandably, some people find this a little bit intimidating, and I should, by the way, say for those of you that go off and have a look at this later and follow the link, and given that my CEO is in the room, this is my take on the ARDC. And one of the key insights that came out of the Lorentz workshop, I think from Françoise Genova, who is online, hi Françoise, is that if you want to develop a template for your organization, you really need to do it as part of a team. You need to have multiple perspectives working together to apply the model to your organization, because different people are going to see different things. So this is my version of a profile for the ARDC. It's not an official version of the profile. Well, we need to do that work. So, yes, some people found that a little bit scary. And so ahead of the Lorentz workshop, CJ developed a narrative template. Natalie has kindly agreed to allow us to share the work that she did ahead of the Lorentz workshop on her organisation, the Canadian Research Data Centre Network. It's a network of data centres dealing with sensitive information, which was a really useful set of use cases going into the workshop. And this particular template starts off by saying what of those essential elements is most important to your organisation now. And so Natalie said, well, for our organisation, the most important thing is governance and leadership. Why is that most important? Because you're working in close partnership with a single data provider, and that partner, which is Statistics Canada, determines the parameters on access. So you're working closely with someone else, they determine how you get access to the data, and therefore how you do that collectively is critical. And so for Natalie, that was the highest priority task. And then some comments on the right, oh yeah, and governance and rules of participation and ICT services and sustainability and other stuff. But you know, there's a series of number ones, and this is the most number one. And so Natalie basically filled this in for each of those essential elements, ranking them, and then for each of the individual categories and subcategories, the narrative template says, okay, so governance and leadership. Intent and definition, is that relevant? I didn't want to do that. Is that relevant now? Is it going to be relevant at some point in the future? Is it never going to be relevant? We had a long debate at the Lorentz workshop about whether relevant was the right adjective, but never mind. And so you've got some bullet points to give you hints about what are the characteristics that you might care about, free text box that you can fill stuff in. So this is, if you like, another way of describing what matters to your organisation. And so that's kind of a very quick walkthrough of two alternative ways of describing your model. So once the web graph tool has been completed, there'll be then 3 different ways of using the model to capture information about your organisation. So I would now like to hand to Mikiko Tanifuji, who is one of the other co-chairs of this workshop, to take you through a Q&A session. Mikiko.
Hello, it's Mikiko Tanifuji from NII Tokyo, and I'm one of this group for 2 years, and we are struggling to implement this GORC model in Japan National Data Services. So, open discussion for any questions about the examples and case studies that introduced so far? Or should I go through this? What can we do better meet the needs in research infrastructure community? Is it such as any communities?
I think the bullet points are sort of there to prompt people.
Right.
Or are you all just feeling overwhelmed?
Hi, thank you so much for this. It's great to see the great progress. I'm Peter Pulsford with Carleton University, but I also represent a group called the Canadian Polar Data Consortium. And so what I'm wondering here when I think about our group, which is kind of quite subnational, we're mostly university data centers who are coordinating loosely and not so loosely, we've just incorporated and so on, but don't have a large administrative infrastructure, we don't have a lot of that. This gives me the sense you're looking more at national level, larger organizations. Is that the case? If not, do you see a situation where you have kind of like GORC Lite or use cases that would be, here's for your organization, particularly some like we saw in the first plenary, where they're like community-based groups who are part of this commons, but may not have the resources that some of the other organizations that are in your world have?
Would you like to say something?
And I guess that's to your questions of what could you do better or where might you go in the future?
In my opinion, it's quite mixture, but
We'll share a mic for a moment, Mikiko, sorry. So I appreciate that it makes it, because of the examples that we've been able to give so far and the folks that have adopted the model have largely been at that national level, it definitely can look like that. But what we found, and something that is in the Lawrence Workshop report, is that the use cases for the GORC model scale from individual projects all the way up to EOSC and federations of commons. So it is really kind of choose your own adventure for how you'd like to go through the model, but I think this is where the implementation profiles and the slices are going to be particularly helpful to kind of navigate which combinations of considerations and which parts of the model are more relevant for folks at different scales. There's a little bit of work on that. You can see that we're starting to kind of figure out how we can organize that information. But I'd say adopting the GORC model or using it can really be at any level. I can say that in Canada, we're looking at starting national data spaces, and that's been said in a public forum. I can say that now, so that's good. And we're actively looking at how can we use the GORC model in that kind of application, and that's like a project of the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, which is a more national infrastructure. So, yeah, it is really kind of choose your own adventure with it.
Yeah, choose your own adventures reminds me of twisty passages all alike, but maybe that's just me. 2 comments to that. Firstly, we're going to be speaking more about GORC adoption use cases in the RDA impact and adoption session, which is tomorrow. And so if you're interested in hearing more about specific adoption use cases, in addition to the ones that we've touched on briefly, you'll hear more about it there. The other thing I wanted to say is that as we get more organizations of varying sizes adopting the model, there's going to be more instances that you can look at as examples. So we're hoping to build up a collection of use cases that you could go in and say, look, I'm looking for a small subnational discipline focused example of applying the model. It may be a different discipline to yours, it may not map particularly exactly onto what you're doing, but it's going to be closer than the EOSC example that CJ's just mentioned. So those are going to get built up over time. Wolfram.
Thank you. Wolfram Horstmann, Karlsruhe, Leibniz Institute for Information Infrastructure in Germany. Also a council in RDA. Yeah, my question, well, the first is maybe more a comment, or also a question. Is, I think, a good indicator for adoption would also be mentioning in policy documents, and looking specifically into that. I think GORC already became pretty close to it being used there, but I'm not quite sure whether it's yet there. And for me, it would be interesting, for example, to see what kind of mentionings are already there, because I think that's a real indicator of impact. Yeah. The second thing, because I've been trying to look at GORC for policy development for several aspects, is that I think what could be useful in the future, that is for the third question about the prioritization. Security aspects become so dominant in policy discussions, and of course we don't like to hear this in our community, but it's a risk. And I think we would need to be able to say more expressly that kind of things like GORC are looking at that. I think looking at the health domain is already very good because we're doing it, yeah, but are we saying it? It's a different question.
Okay, thank you. Two great questions. So the comment on policy, you will see I'm going to put air quotes around the words policy example tomorrow, in the sense that the Global Open Research Commons is in the European Commission's 2026-2027 funding call. So they've recognised the value of the work we're doing, and they're saying we're going to allocate a certain amount of money to continue development work on that. So it's kind of policy adjacent, if I can put it like that. And I do know that one of our co-chairs, another of our co-chairs who couldn't be here at this event, who works in the Open Science Unit within the European Commission, has referred to the fact that there are printouts of the model sitting on desks around his unit. So it's certainly influencing some of the thinking that's going on inside the European Commission as they construct the EOSC Federation, even though it's not necessarily in formal policy documents. On the question of openness and security, so two aspects of that. One was when we came up with the name of this thing, firstly, hint for people that are planning on doing something like this in your future, think about how the acronym is going to be pronounced down the track. We were much more focused on getting the words right rather than thinking that everyone would be saying GORC, or even worse if you're from the Netherlands, GORC. However, at the Lorentz workshop, one of the things we did was we went through each of those four words, Global Open Research Commons. And the report actually goes into a little bit more detail. And Natalie made the point, well, my data is not open. I'm working with an organization who is managing data that has to stay under tight constraints. And so we've kind of nuanced all of global open research and commons. And open has been nuanced to open as possible, as restricted as necessary. In line with some of the thinking coming out of Europe. But then you've also got the security aspects that you touched upon, Wolfram. And so the ICT infrastructure hexagon and the services and tools hexagon, obviously we're going to have to think about how security concerns feed into that. And there I think we won't be trying to reinvent the wheel. There's any number of standards that we could point to there. And make it clear that depending on your use case, you're going to have to think about how you implement security in nationally or internationally appropriate ways within those hexagons. And fleshing out some of that is going to be part of the documentation task, I think. Lars.
So I'm Lars Eklund. I work at the National Bioinformatics Infrastructure Sweden, and for the HPC Center of Uppsala University. I work a lot with these questions as well when it comes to security, and that's one of the things that drove me into this health data commons part. I just wanted to say that you touched on something that is really important, which is standards is a separate thing, and you're not trying to define new standards. You're trying to tell these are the standards that we have that you need to take consideration of. And those, of course, include that. And the same goes for the governance, right? With the policies, depending on where you are, you're going to have different policies that you're going to have to follow. There are going to be different laws in different areas. So I think it's well incorporated in the model to not define new things necessarily. You can define new things, but it's not built for just defining. It's built for figuring out how do we connect the points, how do we connect the dots so that we don't miss the important parts like security concerns, like how do we make this as open as we can while keeping sure that we're safe, secure, and as restricted as we need to be.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah. You have to answer your own question, Mikiko.
The global open research commons does not necessarily mean openly available.
Yeah.
Right? This is something I think it would be a good idea to clarify. It's the same concept as open science. It doesn't mean that it has to be open. Everybody who involved this concept know that, but normally researchers don't know it. And number two, it would be interesting suggestion to listening to the other case study that it would be interesting if we could add PID to the model after export from the interface that you introduced us, so that the model itself can be citable. The data is not necessary to be open, but the model, so that I can implement to the domain I know of, to talk to a researcher, this is somewhere by somebody, but it identified as a service that we can implement because it's a closed model to be corporate. That's what do you think? Or what do you people think?
I think it's a great idea. We should have thought of that. And in fact, given that we've already had a shout out to the research activity identifier in the chief scientist's speech this morning, that having an identifier for the model would be a very nice thing to get added into the RAID. Sorry, I'm looking at Rosie because my organisation is driving the international standardisation of the research activity identifier. Talk to Rosie if you have questions.
So what's your plan?
I think it's an excellent idea.
Yep, I think there's a...
Peter Walsh. Yes, Peter Walsh, Manager of Data and Information Systems at the Institute for Marine and Antarctic Studies down in the country of Tasmania. I had to stir the pot a little bit. And just back on security, and I don't want to take this on too much of a tangent, but we're looking closely at security at the moment as a way to improve access to data. So currently working in a binary model of open or closed data, and we talk about security, and the things that jump into my mind anyway, and potentially our minds, is that when we talk about security, we're talking about closing off data. To me, introducing security gives us a model for managed access to data, and we're currently dealing with trying to get access to a lot of data for offshore renewables and how we look at cumulative impact, and we're having a lot of difficulty getting access to that data purely because it is a binary model, or it's under these very extreme types of sharing agreements that don't actually fit any particular security model. And we would love to see something like data spaces introduced that takes a very modelled approach to how we manage security and actually gives us access to the data much quicker than it does currently. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a way of thinking about security.
Thanks. Just on the data spaces and the security, again, my organisation, the Australian Research Data Commons, has a number of different thematically themed research data commons. One of those, the Planet Research Data Commons in particular, is investigating data spaces exactly for that kind of granular security model. Kieran, wave your hand. So Kieran Dharmawardena is working on adapting, or adapting is probably not the right word, applying the data space approach to the work we're doing in the Planet Research Data Commons. So I encourage you to have a chat to Kieran if you haven't done so already. Are there any on, sorry, Nina, are you checking the online questions? Okay. Oh, Kieran. Sorry, given I just name checked you.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm Kieran Dharmawardena from ARDC. I just wanted to add to this comments that we've been having about security and that. One of the things that I picked up a few years ago that came out was this idea that we're on the third wave and fourth wave of open data. And the narrative and the thinking of that binary state was in the second wave of open data, where we wanted to make as much data openly available. But the narrative on the third wave is been around saying open for a purpose with a group. And I think that narrative hasn't actually caught on enough. And I think we need to start to bring that out a lot more in what we're saying, because that association with open being this binary state really causes a lot of challenges that are unnecessary.
Bob Grossman, University of Chicago. I don't know if it's impacting others, but what's impacting a lot of the comments we run now is the changing definition of open and security in the context of AI, in that there's a lot of demands on the data and it's being monetized in different ways. I'm just speaking of our experience. I don't know if you guys are following, it's a little chaotic in the US right now in terms of data. But there's just a lot of demands on the data, a lot of changing economic models from the people who are doing AI. So we've taken the view that we have to put a fair amount of automation around this, because you can't manually respond to all the individual different demands from dozens and dozens of groups trying to take the data and not particularly follow your licenses. So a lot of this is how do you, in the context of openness, sharing, and security, how do you put enough automation around there so that in a time of diminishing resources, you can do what you want so the data is used for particular research purposes, but there's enough automation on it so that you can respond to the request in a responsible manner. So that's a big focus of what we're doing now.
May I say something? I completely agree with your concern. In my day-to-day discussions, we started to discuss how to prevent the data from access of API. And so not humans use anymore. The GORC model should be AI applicable or disapplicable models in some point, or maybe already in a point of time. Yes, Hilary, you want to say something?
Yep.
Hilary Hanaho, RDA. Sort of a shameless plug, but actually it brings to my mind from what Bob said. So RDA is just starting, so the Secretariat is just starting. We'll launch it tomorrow. Work to identify agentic AI, agents for AI for the benefit of and support of science and research. We're doing this in collaboration with Microsoft. Through our public-private partnership framework, all open. We've done them in the past. The famous Moldret that you see is actually fruit of work with Oracle. And so I think I'd like to highlight it because what we're going to try and do is understand where are the research priorities, where AI agents can be implemented into the research, if you like, life cycle and things in support of. And obviously that's a benefit to Microsoft, but I think it's a huge benefit to our community. So I would like GORC also, and those of you involved in other activities in RDA, please watch out for it and, you know, take some time to fill in the survey. It's a community consultation, like all things with RDA are, very open. So thank you for giving me the time.
Right, Tani? So,
We're going to cut the discussion here. We're going to move on to next steps, if that's okay.
yeah.
Right, do you want to lead that? Or you want me to lead that?
No, you do.
All right, thank you for the excellent discussion, folks. We only have like 2 minutes left. And so what I'd like us to do is, wow, okay, so this guy just got really not helpful. All right, so what I'd like to do before we actually look at the slide deck for next steps is bring you back to the Mentimeter. So please sign into the collaborative notes. We should have done it at the beginning. Yeah, put your name in, sign in. The QR code brings you directly to the collaborative notes. If you still have the Menti up, there's a little, you can just click the link on your screen. But if we can just get everyone to scan that code, that would be great. It's also in the session link on the app and on the RDA website. So however you get to those collaborative notes, just go in there, there's a big table, and add your name. That helps us know how many people attended this session and who we can send out the content after the session to specifically. All right, I'm not seeing any more phones pointed at the screen, so that's good. So it'll also be where you can find all of the content from today, and in particular the live version of the slide deck, which has links to everything. So next steps. This is a lot of work that we've been doing, and it sounds like, oh, it's well on its way and it's chugging along, and it is to some degree, but we are always looking for people to join the working group, the task forces, and the task groups. So please feel free to come to any of our meetings. We meet on the last Thursday of the month, except October, because we're meeting right now, but we will meet in November. So just email me. You'll have access to these slides if you sign into the collaborative notes. Sign in collaborative notes. And you just email me about it, and I will make sure to get you coordinated with the right people. We're going to continue to create the stuff that we're creating, and to help with our working group, we're going to start having coffee hours as well. So we're hoping to get folks outside the working group to come to those and kind of share experiences using the model and, you know, pros and cons and all that good stuff. We want to increase our transparency, so you're going to see more stuff on the RDA website about us, and we are really looking at creating that registry through the interactive web interface. So more to come. Thank you so much for coming to this session, and we look forward to interacting with you the rest of International Data Week and hopefully afterwards as well. Now it's time for lunch, I think.